Shalom, family, and blessings to you. You are tuned in to the Israelite Life podcast with Prophet and Katryna. Let's dive right into this exciting episode.
Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Barakatham. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Israelite Life with Prophet and Katryna. How you doing, babe?
I'm doing great, love.
It has been about, 3 weeks?
It's been 3 weeks. Yeah.
We took a 3-week vacation from the podcast. Not a 3-week vacation, but
Right.
our last episode, we actually shot on location in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And then just so many things in life were happening that we have not had the opportunity to get back in front of these cameras. But I'm excited that we're here.
Me too.
Yes. So let's not delay it. Let's dive right into it. Where are we at in our book?
We are on the love languages. Number 1 is words of affirmation.
Excellent. So if you have not yet had the opportunity to purchase your own copy, hopefully you did, but down below in the comments, there will be a link for you to purchase this great book. We're going to be covering it all season. It is called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. And right now we are diving into the very first of the love languages, which is words of affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
What stood out right from the top in this chapter for you?
There's a part where the author says, the tongue has the power of life and death. And they were quoting it from some type of literary article, but the Most High, in essence, has told us this.
Well, actually, so he does give credit where credit is due. He says in this
Okay,
book, he says, Solomon, author of the ancient Hebrew wisdom literature, wrote, the tongue has the power of life and death. Now, he's only partially quoting that. He's not doing the whole thing. Do you have the scripture there? Let me pull up the actual scripture so that we can get exactly what it says. Since we're going to start this one off with a
Hebrew, I had it from Proverbs 18:21.
Proverbs 18:21. Okay, let's get that. You got it there? Go ahead and read it for us.
Actually, I do not have it here, baby, but I
no
can pull it
problem.
up.
Got it right here. It says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. So this is absolutely true. And the author starts this chapter out with a biblical quote, but he doesn't tell you where it's from. He just tells you it's from Solomon.
Right.
Speaking of Solomon, we want to take a quick second and introduce you to the latest member of our family. This is Solomon here on her lap. He is a toy poodle, and we call him Solly. He's
Yes.
going to be hanging out with us for the whole episode.
He is.
Okay, back to this now, real quick. He says, many couples have never learned the tremendous power of verbally affirming each other. I absolutely agree with that.
Yes.
If you don't receive verbal affirmations as a child growing up, then you don't learn to give them. And this is a big part of what I'm talking about, confirming or denying. It's saying something in response to what has been said, right? So if somebody says, how weird would it be for someone to say, I love you, and then you just sit there looking around crazy and not say anything back,
I understand.
right? So saying something in response is a form of verbal affirmation.
Yeah, I agree. You spoke of people growing up and imagining them growing up and not receiving any affirmation. They wouldn't know how to give it.
Yeah.
I would also say sometimes, because this is kind of how wonderful the Most High can work, that people can grow up not receiving that, and that's the thing they thirst for and gravitate for. And so they develop over time, or because they want it, the ability to do that. They want it so bad, they offer that to others with the hope that it will be reciprocated, and it isn't always that way.
It isn't always that way. And this is one of the very important things about words of affirmation. This word affirmation means to make firm. It means to make it known. And so when you are speaking to someone, like when you and I speak and you tell me, oh, I love you, or this, when you give me words of affirmation, I don't have to try to read your mind about what you're thinking or feeling. It becomes very clear. And there's a whole lot of mind reading or lack of mind reading taking places in other relationships.
Yes.
Because people are not affirming. They're not confirming and they're not denying. They're just hoping that their spouse or partner picks up on their body language or
Yeah.
figures this thing out.
Yeah, I spoke of it in a previous podcast. It's that osmosis conversation.
Yes.
Like, I thought about it. Didn't you hear me say it?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So,
Yeah. So in the next part, he gives he explains verbal compliments or words of affirmation are powerful communicators of love. They are best expressed in simple, straightforward statements of affirmation. And then he gives some examples, which are very simple. He's like, you look sharp in that suit.
right.
He's like, do you ever look incredible in that dress? Wow. I really like how you're always on time to pick me up at work. These are just simple examples of things that couples should be saying to each other to verbally express their gratitude and their love.
That's right. It's so easy for us to express our thoughts about what we see or what we think is in our spouse. Yet we don't consider taking the time and see how powerful positive words are.
Yeah.
They say it trumps every time. I mean, you can try to say something negative or harsh towards, like, let's say you're raising your child, and you'll say something harsh thinking that you're helping them by being tough on them, not realizing that if you honestly just told them all the wonderful aspects of who they are, how much more it would elevate them.
Yeah.
So I don't know if was it in this one or the other one when he had recommended to the woman, next time, just don't tell the husband. Is it this one?
It's in this chapter.
Okay, I love
Yes,
it
it's in
because
chapter.
this is the one. Yeah.
And so one of the things that stood out to me in this next part is he says, he asks a question to the reader. He says, what would happen to the emotional climate of a marriage if the husband and wife heard such words of affirmation regularly?
That's right.
So the entire climate of the marriage, the atmosphere around the house and in every conversation would change if words of affirmation became a part of everyday conversation and communication.
That's right. It creates almost this imaginary security blanket, right? Not in a negative manner, as if it's a pacifier. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, in essence, it's like I feel certain and sure because not only does my spouse or my friend communicate with me that they absolutely love me, but not just in words, but not only in saying I love you, but in also acknowledging other ways in which I contribute to their life.
Yeah.
Or saying things that build me up. It helps me to feel secure in our relationship that they see me, or even if they can't see me, that they see me the way I see myself as well. It just depends on the health of the person.
Yeah.
You could speak life into a person that they don't realize that's in them. Or you could affirm it in a person who knows, and you're like, yeah, all right, I'm on the right track.
Yes.
That
is good. People need everyone, and I'm thinking of Solomon here now. He needs to be affirmed that his behavior is appropriate or inappropriate.
Yes.
And but because our puppy cannot speak, it would be like without the spoken thing, he's trying to read our mind or read our faces
Yes,
or
he
read
is.
our energy.
Right.
And how much easier it is that we can speak and affirm. So whenever people have the opportunity to speak something positive, we should definitely do that.
Yeah, he mentioned something significant. It's not just trying to put this on every now and then. A lot of the stuff we talk about as far as our Israelite life, it's our life.
Yeah.
It's our identity. He says words of affirmation regularly, right? This isn't a one time and when they're feeling good, you kind of withdraw a little bit. No,
Yeah.
it's not authentic then. And you're not doing it to get a response out of the person. You're literally organically identifying with parts of who they are, and you're recognizing it verbally
Yeah.
and expressing it to them.
I want to give an example so that our viewers and listeners can understand the power of words of affirmation a little bit better. I want you to imagine that someone grows up and they're used to communicating amongst their family by affirming with words of affirmation. They hear every day, you look great, I love you. They're always hearing words of affirmation. And then they get into a relationship with someone who does not speak that language. they will not feel loved because it's not coming to them in the way that they have 10, 15, 20 years of experience with.
Right.
You may still love that person,
Right.
but if you're not speaking the language that they understand, it's not going to translate into them as love.
That's correct. It's not going to translate. And vice versa, like being able to speak words into people, because we're talking about the power of words. Those affirming words are extremely powerful. That spoken language in that person's love language is extremely powerful. The same difference is if you speak a thing into a person's life that's not positive, it can have a huge impact. I'll
Yes.
give you an example. It is not this way for us now, but growing up, to the best of my parents' ability, they did the best they could, but they did not get very good words of affirmation growing up. They got very harsh words, and their words were meant to, quote unquote, protect them from becoming something different than their parents desired. It was tough love.
Yeah.
Right? In return, what would my parent do? They would do the same thing. And I remember one day I was standing in the mirror and I thought I was the cutest thing ever. I just literally cut my hair a little bit like a Toni Braxton type situation. And I was feeling myself. In a sense, I felt great about the accomplishment I did. That's in my mind, right? My mom comes in looking at me and she's standing there and she looks and she says something that might sound really, really hard and harsh. But give me a moment and it'll be more clear. She looks and she says, "You think you're cute?" And I say, "Yeah." And she goes, "I've seen better." It sounds so harsh. And I'm going to tell you something. In that moment, with good intentions, in that moment, something in me turned off. And it turned off, and I didn't believe that it was okay to look at myself and feel confident.
Yeah.
And that was not the intention. The intention was, "Oh, girl, you're absolutely beautiful. I do not want you to be conceited." She was trying to cut that off.
Right. She was trying to say something positive, but the way it came out and got translated, it produced a negative outcome.
And that's something I wanted to bring tonight. Now, Mark, my mama thinks I'm absolutely gorgeous. You know what I'm saying? And she loves me to pieces. That wasn't the intentions, right? And sometimes we can still be thinking we're affirming somebody, but it is the way in which we affirm
Yeah. The
that
words,
plays a significant part.
the actual words are a part of it.
Yes, it is.
And he talks about this in the chapter, but the tone and the way that it's delivered
Yes.
is a big part of it. One of the examples that he gives, he says, if you say it like this, "I love you," that means something totally different than saying, "I love you."
Right.
Those are the same words with two different deliveries.
Two
They
different
make
meanings.
Two different meanings.
That's right.
Absolutely. Now, in this next part of the book, he goes into explaining a really good story about one of his people that he was counseling, who was attempting to get their husband to do something specific, which was paint the bedroom.
That's right.
And she's nagging him.
This is so powerful. I love this part of the story. Go ahead.
She's nagging him and nagging him and nagging him, taking every opportunity to remind this man to paint the bedroom. And so when she goes and she speaks with Dr. Chapman, he gives her some great advice.
Yes.
Right here, he says, "I have two suggestions. One, don't ever mention painting the bedroom again."
She was like, "Wait, what?"
It says, "I repeated, don't ever mention it again." And then he explains the reason why. He says, "You don't have to tell him anymore. He already knows."
That's right.
The second suggestion I have is that the next time your husband does anything good, give him a verbal compliment. If he takes the garbage out, say, "Dan, I want you to know that I really appreciate your taking the garbage out." Don't say it's about time you took the garbage out. Now, we talked about that before.
Yes.
Sometimes we think we're saying the right thing.
Right.
We're just saying it the wrong way.
Saying it the wrong way. There's such good intentions behind it, but we really do have to understand what is a compliment versus an undertone of a complaint.
Yeah.
Right?
That's exactly right.
You even helped me with one of the last episodes. We did a real live moment.
Yeah.
where I was thinking I was saying it kind of correct, but you were like, no, that's actually a complaint. I was
Well,
like,
I think the language that we speak most often, most comfortably, is our primary language, and we stop listening to ourselves speak it. We're like, how you receive it is how you receive it. We stop being aware of how our words are coming across to the other person.
yes,
That would allow a request, an honest request, to come forward as a complaint.
yes,
People don't respond well to complaints.
right,
But a request, people are like, yeah, I would love to help you with that. He gives some other examples of that later that we'll bring up. But this is the thing. We're not suggesting that people give verbal flattery.
no,
It's not just a bunch of flattery in order to get what you want.
that's right.
The purpose of it is for you to say what you mean what you say.
Yes, that's correct. Love it. All right, let's see, because there's a lot of meat in here, a lot of content in here.
This was our first really getting into the book. And it was our longest chapter so far, but a lot of it had to do with stories. Because once he explains the overall concept that not everyone is going to speak the same language, and this is how the words of affirmation, love language goes, then all of a sudden a light bulb goes off and you're like, all I really need now is some examples of what it is and what it's not. And then we start to compare and we say, oh, a lot of what I've been saying has not been words of affirmation.
That's right. Yeah. It's interesting because, this woman in here, she was willing to try this. It could have not been his love language. It could have been, and later on, he'll talk about that.
Yes.
But it's worth a try to figure out whether the climate of the relationship will change, because later on she comes back and
they find out that even though he's giving her all these words of affirmation, like he learned something. So between the man and the woman, his primary love language is words of affirmation, and he's giving them to her, and it's great, and he's receiving them, and it's great. But that's not her primary love language.
Right. That's the second story. Like this story this story that this person, she goes home, she goes away from the office and she's mad that he gave her the advice.
Yeah.
She's like, I want this done. And he gave her advice that was to her the opposite of what she's trying to get done.
Yeah.
Only later to realize she applied just letting that go and complimenting that man.
So it says here in this first part, it says, she says, I don't see how that's going to help get the bedroom painted.
Right.
Right. So she doesn't understand. But then the Doc Chapman, he says, I said, you asked for my advice. You have it. It's free. She wasn't very happy with me when she left.
That's right.
3 weeks later, however, she came back to my office and said it worked. She had learned that verbal compliments are far greater motivators than nagging words.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's great to be like, I received some advice.
Right.
I'm not sure that I like it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
It came from somebody who knows more than I do.
Right.
She went ahead and she tried it, and then it worked.
Right. And I'd say it won't even hurt. The balance out there is she switched from nagging to giving verbal compliments. It's not going to hurt. It might not be their love language, but even the Most High tells us whatever's good, whatever's, these are the things we're supposed to be thinking about. And if you're thinking about it, you're more than likely talking about it. And so it won't even hurt if we gave our spouse or friends
It won't hurt
compliments.
the other person, but for some men, this is a difficult thing to do. If you were not raised giving words of affirmation, it becomes very foreign. You're like, I don't want those sappy, mushy words. I don't talk like that. I'm hard. You know what I'm saying?
I get it.
So it would feel like it hurts to somebody who's not familiar with it. Like that little area might be the thing where you need to grow as a man or a woman, need to grow and experiment in so that you can make a deeper intimacy in the relationship. Because if the woman that you're with is waiting for you to affirm how you feel and you're rigid and hard and not saying anything, you're always going to have a disconnect.
That's right. I grew up around a lot of males, and so they talk freely. You know what I mean? You one of the homegirls, you typically one of the guys. You know, but I remember when their girlfriends at the time, the girlfriend at the time was looking for them to affirm, but they said they would know it by my actions.
That's right. And we think that.
Agree, and I agree. They do. However, they still want to hear it. They could see it all day. Yeah. And someone who requires words of affirmation would want it tied together.
Yeah. He goes into this next part, which is related to people who have a difficult time giving compliments, like just randomly saying, oh, you have on nice shoes or whatever, some random thing. Okay, that's not exactly what he's talking about. But if you have a hard time giving words of affirmation, he suggests encouraging words.
Yes, he does.
And he says giving verbal compliments is only one way to express words of affirmation to your spouse. Another dialect is encouraging words. The word encourage means to inspire courage. All of us have areas in which we feel insecure. We lack courage. And that lack of courage often hinders us from accomplishing the positive things that we would like to do. Then he goes into telling a story about a husband and wife, and she lacked the courage to do the thing that she really loved to do because she had received some rejection.
Right.
This is a very interesting story because when you are a creative person, the art that you create is very personal.
Yes, it is.
Right? It's a very personal thing. And if someone speaks against that art or your expression, it can really shut you down.
Yes, it can.
And you can stay closed off until someone says the right thing to put the courage back in you to move forward with that thing.
Right. Like I'm an artist. I love creating art. And I remember being in my office environment, and I wasn't sure if I was able to bring my art in or not, right, to hang it up. And when I finally did bring in my art, because it didn't have a certain color scheme to go with that color scheme, it was not well received. And honestly speaking, it was my art, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And there were many who thought it was beautiful, and it didn't matter whether it was color schemed or not color schemed. And I can't say that it wasn't quite deflating. I ended up deciding that I had a smaller piece of art that was best in front of me, and I was okay with, that piece of art in front of me. And I would look at my art in a different place.
Yeah.
But it can be very deflating.
Yeah. People's critique of something that is personal to us, as you say, it can be deflating. It can also be traumatizing because let's say someone is just working on their ability to sing or their ability to rap or dance.
Yes.
And then someone gives a one critical comment about it. It can remove all their courage to even go farther.
That's right.
So that is related to what Solomon was saying, that death and life are in the power of the tongue.
Yes.
You can kill someone's dreams, their motivations, their hopes by saying one word. Or related to this, you can put the life back into it.
Yes.
And so we should be looking for those things that our spouse does that they're not entirely carrying a lot of courage about, and find that thing and speak into it.
That's
and
right.
then and literally speak some encouragement into that thing. If they're a good cook, let them know they're a good cook.
That's right.
And that they should cook more often.
Yes.
It's like, I don't think he really likes my food. There should be no I don't think in the relationship. Part of the relationship is getting to know that person.
Yes.
And when you know, you're like, I know what he would order for you and I, for instance. When we go to a restaurant, I don't even have to order my food.
No.
I don't have to order my drink. I would never come back to the table and you have your drink and your food and I'm sitting there like, where's mine at? I was in the bathroom. Where's it at? And you would say, I don't know.
No.
Because you know exactly what I like.
I do.
Right? So that's a big part of it.
Yeah. The other thing about that area is being a good receiver as well. If it's your love language, a lot of times we can do what we call deflecting. A lot of people, sometimes, even though they want to hear the compliment and it does speak life into them, they're not very good receivers. Maybe they haven't had it in a long time, or they feeling issues of trust, which we talk about a lot. A lot of these things are wrapped up in whether they trust a person or not,
Yeah.
or trust the language. And so sometimes that can play a part where people are not necessarily good receivers. So they deflect and not believe that compliment is that compliment, or that encouragement is that encouragement. Like you could tell someone, you're an amazing singer.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I'm not that good.
Right. But that has a lot to do with their upbringing.
Yes.
If they're not comfortable receiving words of affirmation, that will not be their love language. They'll be like, I don't know. They will shy away from those things. In reference to it being a language, we have to be aware, how is what I'm saying being communicated to the person that I'm saying it to?
Right.
That's what makes it a language. Are they receiving it? Are they understanding it? And are they able to respond to it? Because if I go and I start speaking to someone who speaks no English whatsoever, they only speak Chinese, you know, it doesn't matter what I'm saying at all. It doesn't matter because they don't understand it. They're not going to receive it.
That's right. Yeah.
So
I can understand that.
that's a form of deflecting. They're like, shrugging their shoulders, going, no sé. Right? No sabes.
Yeah.
Okay. So watch. He says, and this is part of the encouraging words. He says, perhaps your spouse has untapped potential in one or more areas of life. That potential may be awaiting your encouraging words. Perhaps she needs to enroll in a course to develop that potential. Maybe he needs to meet some people who have succeeded in that area who can give him insight on the next step he needs to take. Your words may give your spouse the courage necessary to take that first step.
Right.
It has to become a part of our regular vocabulary to affirm and to encourage people. Either you're going to speak life and build them up, or you're going to speak death and be tearing everything down. And speaking death is a very negative and critical outlook on life. You ever met anybody who, no matter what is said, their response is always negative?
Yeah.
No matter how good of news you give them, they can always find the worst in every situation.
Yeah.
We are not called to be those people.
No.
As Israelites, our life is about the word, and we should be speaking positive words as often as possible, especially in our relationship.
Agree. Even in the book of Hebrews and in other areas, Hebrews 3, it tells us, but exhort one another daily. Right?
That's right, yes.
Like it's so important to be able to lift people up. It's very, very easy to find a fault or wrong or otherwise. It really is.
Yeah, I agree.
I think people haven't invested enough time to look for the good in other people, and not only see it, but actually say something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes some courage. It takes some courage to say, I'm going to change my pattern of speaking so that I can find positive things to say.
Right.
It's going to make it to the point where you're looking for something positive and encouraging to say. And then in this next part of the book, he says, encouragement requires empathy and seeing the world from your spouse's perspective. We must first learn what is important to our spouse. Only then can we give encouragement. With verbal encouragement, we are trying to communicate, I know, I care, I am with you, how can I help?
Right. And he gives an example. He says, so when he's talking about encouraging someone to develop an interest that he or she already has, it says, for example, a wife might pressure her husband to look for a more lucrative job. The wife thinks she's encouraging her spouse, but to him, it sounds more like condemnation.
Yes. How it's presented. And if he doesn't want that, then what you think you're encouraging him to do, he's actually going to view as you're taking away from what I'm already doing.
That's right, which the author even says, it says, but if he has the desire and motivation to seek a better position, her words will bolster his resolve. Yes, it will, if that's the mindset. Or it could crush him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now watch, there's another section that says, most of us have more potential than we will ever develop. What holds us back often is courage. A loving spouse can supply that all-important catalyst. Of course, encouraging words may be difficult for you to speak. It may not be your primary love language. If you have a pattern of critical and condemning words, it may take great effort for you to learn this second language. But I can assure you that it will be worth the effort. This is absolutely true. In a relationship where one of the people's primary love language is words of affirmation, if the partner never learns to do that thing, they will never be able to express how much they actually love themselves to their partner.
Yeah.
There'll always be some disconnect. They're like, no matter, you can get diamond rings, you can do all these different things. You're like, I buy you jewelry, I clean the house, I do all this stuff. And they're like, I don't need you to do any of that. I need you to tell me you love me. And you're like, wait a minute, I could have saved thousands of dollars and all this stuff. And they're like, yeah, you could have.
You could have.
If only you had, because they get the gift and they're like, oh, this is great, but it's not what I want. What I want is for you to say it. Some people are like, if you love me, tell me you love me.
Yes. Yeah. And the author says here there's a bit of requirements for some of this to occur, and he talks about encouragement requires empathy and seeing the world from your spouse's perspective.
Yeah.
Which is really great because it allows us to consider and say, I'm going to pay attention to the responses of my spouse, right? We are keen to pay attention to certain reactions we have that are negative.
Yes.
But it's wonderful to pay attention to the response. You'll notice if it resonates with that person or not. You give them a gift and they put the gift right to the side.
Yeah.
It probably isn't their love language.
That's right.
Or you give them a gift and they're like, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Versus a person that gets a gift and it's their language. They're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, they love the bow. They love the bag. They love the everything, about it. There is a response to the love language that they have. But what did I wrote something down here. I said, because that reminded me, it says in Philippians 2, it says, look not every man on his own thing, but every man also on the things of others.
Amen.
Right? And so just taking the time to consider the other person's point of view. So it says we must first learn what is important to our spouse or our friends, for those who are listening who are not a couple. Only then can we give encouragement. With verbal encouragement, we are trying to communicate, I know, I care, I am with you. How can I help you? Which you've said that. But it's just really cool.
That definitely bears repeating because people need to know what is actually being said with this verbal communication.
Yeah.
The first thing is, I know. That means I understand.
Yeah.
That's what it means. I understand what you're going through, and I care about what you care about.
Yeah.
And you're not alone. I'm with you. And if you're with me, help me. Right?
That's right.
And so how can I help? That's what is being communicated. So that part is very important.
Yeah, indeed. And if we're done with this part, there is a second part to this area of words of affirmation, the kind words.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's jump into the kind words.
Okay. It says, love is kind, right? Which we've heard that many a times in the word of truth. It says, if then we are communicating love verbally, we must use kind words. That has to do with the way we speak. Right? Like I had given that example earlier, a great thing that needed to be said, but very much said the wrong way.
Yeah.
Can tear a person down. And so I think he goes into some things. He says, sometimes our words say one thing, but our tone of voice say another. Right, which you gave that example, right?
Yeah. And he refers to that as sending double messages.
Yes.
Our spouse will usually interpret our message based on our tone of voice, not the words we use. So this is very important in a relationship. when a man and a woman are going back and forth and they're talking, the relationship slowly changes. No matter what is being said, if he starts to raise his voice up, the what is being said is less important than how it is being said.
Yeah.
And then often a woman will say, well, you're yelling at me. You're raging, you're raising your voice, whatever it is. And he's like, no, I'm not. And then he's still raising his voice. But what they're not aware of is they're both passionate about what they're saying.
Yeah.
And it's one of those points where it's like, they should take a couple minutes, relax, bring it back down, right? It's on a 5, bring it back down to a 2,
Yeah.
and start the conversation again.
Agree. I would say tone plays a part. Like I'll give you an example related to us, right? There are times I'll ask you, how you doing, baby? And there'll be a different tone depending on a circumstance, right?
Yeah.
So let me give an example is I might say, hey, baby, how you doing? You'd be like, I'm fine. I'm good. Or I'm good, right? Yeah. Just blunt like that. Or another time I might ask you, how you doing? You'd be like, I'm good. It'll be a little funny,
tone, yes.
a funny light, right?
Yeah.
And I will try to gauge at that moment, like, how is he feeling? Like how, what's going on for him? I'm honing in, like, is he okay? He's saying he's okay, so he's okay. But what else is going on? And reading a bit more of the tone and realizing that sometimes if the tone is, I'm good, it could be, I'm good, but I'm tired.
Yeah.
And later, if I'm invested more in what I would like to know or how I can encourage you, I'll inquire more, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, is there anything you need? And I'll ask again, or I'll ask again. And, or I'll be like, is there anything else? And you'll be like, I'm just tired. And I'm like, okay, that fits the tone, right? Even though the words are, I'm good.
Right. Well, you're very good at realizing when something is not the normal and then working to get it back to the normal. Whereas sometimes people are doing that mind reading thing, the osmosis conversation, and they're like, oh, something's wrong with him. And then they don't even care.
They don't care.
Yeah. They're like, well, you in a bad mood. Why?
Right.
Why? What can you do to help? Literally those things we went through earlier. I'm here. I can help.
Right. I care.
Yes.
Right. It's, it's looking out for the best interests of the person.
Yeah.
Like if you're invested in that person, you want what's good for them. And if it ain't good, you want to dive in and figure out why and how you can help with that. Again, I know I'm here. I care. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
The author says the manner in which we speak is exceedingly important. Now watch, he does this thing again. He says, an ancient sage once said, a soft answer turns away anger. Okay, the ancient sage, it's from the Bible.
It is.
And some people have been like, oh, well, that book is not the Bible, so I don't know anything about it. What he's saying is from the scriptures.
Yes, he is.
That's the same wisdom that we want to share with the viewers and listeners on our channel. It's Israelite wisdom. It's pertaining to our life.
Right.
But he goes on to say, a soft answer turns away anger. And that's not exactly what it says in King James, but that's the understanding of it. And then he says, when your spouse is angry and upset and lashing out words of heat, if you choose to be loving, you will not reciprocate with additional heat, but with a soft voice.
That's right. He gives an example of something like that. So he says, I would be, the spouse is telling their spouse, they're saying, I would be delighted to wash dishes tonight, said in a snarling tone, will not be received as an expression of love. On the other hand, we can share pain, sadness, even anger in a kind manner, and that will be expressed in love. For example, I felt disappointed and hurt that you didn't offer to help me this evening. Said with gentle directness can be an expression of love, which is really great. Like we can begin to communicate with each other and tell each other our feelings. I think that's also what can occur where people don't begin to express themselves. So it's really not expressing love to the person if you can't even tell them in the moment that something hurt you. That's not self-love. If you hurt me and I don't tell you that hurt, I'm not loving myself. That's not.
That's called tolerating.
Yeah, it's not very encouraging either.
Yeah.
Right? It can even for some people affirm a very negative thought process within them. And so I think it's really important to be able to express love in a kind manner by still expressing difficult things. So
I noticed today that both you and I do something similar, which is when someone is, the more upset they're getting, the softer we bring our voice down. And that's one of the things that he's talking about. Now, if you're talking with someone and they're getting hype and you're getting hype, the situation is going to get very hype and out of control very quickly.
Yep.
Right? So that's called fighting fire with fire.
Right.
When we fight fire with fire, everything ends up burned down.
Yes, it does.
Okay, but so if you're talking with somebody and the more hype they get, the softer your voice becomes, it will balance them out.
Yeah.
And it will make it way more obvious that they're doing way too much, right? When you bring your voice down.
Agree. Let's see. He will keep reiterating this idea, and I think this is really important, and I believe it will help people to maybe even get started. The whole idea is that we will seek to put ourselves in that person's shoes. We will take time to consider how they feel about a situation. How do they feel love? If we want them to feel love, what would be in their best interest to provide them with that will be love? Now, I'm not talking about giving them anything and everything. Just like you said, flattery. I'm not going to give you flattery or tell you stuff that doesn't exist.
Right.
Right? You're an amazing husband, and I'm so grateful for how much you helped me around the house. If that ain't true, don't tell him that.
That's right.
Do not tell him that. But also looking out for the person's best interest is a lot of times, looking out for our best interest is being able to communicate those things. But we do have to be authentic and honest in the moment about it. And there's always something great to be told about a person. He said that in the beginning. Is there anything that your husband does great?
That's right. Acknowledge that part first.
The whole thought process is seeking to put ourselves in that person's shoes, to see the events through their eyes. That is literally an opportunity to love a person. And I think you'll figure out a lot more of how they feel loved by taking time to consider another person.
The words of affirmation is an opportunity to express how we feel, not an opportunity to give flattery or say things that don't exist. And that's an important part, because if you're saying things that don't exist, that's deception. But if you are acknowledging what does exist, however small it may be, it may seem completely insignificant, for you to address it and say that you appreciate it would produce more of it in the relationship.
I think you may have said this, but the author goes, you will seek understanding and reconciliation. I think people don't quite understand that, right? Like, I think people misunderstand reconciliation. Like they're going to have to figure it out. They'll get over it, that kind of thing. But I think kind words do bring about reconciliation, being able to consider the great attributes of another person and say that to them. But at the same time, communicate if it was difficult. It's still kind and considerate of the person and even of your own thoughts and feelings to be able to learn how to express both of those things. And it does promote reconciliation, but it can also speak volumes if that's the person's love language.
Amen. This next paragraph has a lot packed into it. It's the one that starts off where love doesn't keep a score of wrongs. Again, biblical advice, love keeps no record. Okay. Love doesn't bring up past failures. This part is very important. In giving the words of affirmation, it's not telling you bring up old things from the past. It's saying stay in the moment, And whatever's happening in the moment, find a way to complement that thing. When someone is constantly bringing up some failure or something from the past, it means they're living in the past, right? When a couple does that, it's like they can never make things good in the now because one of them is always bringing up something from the past.
That's right.
Bringing that thing back, it was dead. It might have happened a month ago, a year ago. It was dead. But when you re-speak it and you bring it into a present conversation, it's like bringing it back to life.
Right. Even in the moment. If you have discussed it and it's done, it literally has passed, even if it's 1 minute ago.
Yeah.
You guys have gone past it. You're right. It is damaging to a relationship to keep bringing up wrongs. Well, people might say, well, what if they didn't change? You know,
Right.
it's hurtful that they keep doing that
Well,
thing.
some people expect there to be an immediate change. And there's not an immediate change when someone has 30 years of behavior and then they get into a new relationship and that behavior is not acceptable. They're not going to change overnight. So when we get into a relationship with someone like that, we have to know there is a growing and learning process. Do not expect them to be perfect. And right after he says, love doesn't bring up past failures, he says, none of us is perfect. In marriage, we do not always do the best or right thing. We have sometimes done and said hurtful things to our spouses. We cannot erase the past. We can only confess it and agree that it was wrong. We can ask for forgiveness and try to act differently in the future. Now, that is very important. That's like literally, we dealt with it and it's in the past. And now let's focus on the present.
But I do appreciate, so it doesn't matter whether the relationship is the embarkment of a relationship or whether you've been together for many, many years. The idea here and the practical here is we can only confess. It's part of the forgiveness process too, right? You got to be able to express that you logically and aware that you've done a thing and express that thing. Confess what has occurred. Confess it and agree that it was wrong.
Yeah.
Some people they're nonchalant or they don't even bother to acknowledge that that wrong was a wrong.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to move forward and encourage someone if they haven't taken account that this thing was actually wrong. It will repeat itself most of the time. Yeah. So these practicals here are very helpful for couples in a relationship. They're like, well, how do I do this? We've been behaving this way for so long. This right here is a practical understanding that you can't erase the past, understanding that you didn't marry a perfect person, and neither are you.
That's right.
Perfect. But being able to take responsibility for your actions and also being aware that that action was wrong and also asking for forgiveness. This is really important. Asking for forgiveness and try to act differently in the future. I love the word try. Yet at the same time, I know people have qualms with the word try.
I do.
You either do it or you don't do it.
That's what I
can
think.
hear you, right?
Yes.
Say it. What I believe when they utilize this word try, it's a righteous man falleth 7 times, but gets back up. That
Just
kind
man.
of try. I
That's
mean, a
right.
just man. That kind, right? The ideal is not that they're going to keep staying in that state, but they're going to come up out of that state. They're going to make every effort not to continue in doing those things.
One of the things that's very important is there is going to be failures. There's going to be mistakes. But getting over that thing as fast as possible is in the benefit of both parties in the relationship. So if she does something wrong and you try to hold it against her and create that disconnect for as long as possible as a form of punishment, intimacy is impossible during that time. Or if he does something wrong, let's say you caught him in something, he lied or whatever, and now in the back of your mind, the woman is constantly holding that over his head until the forgiveness comes, intimacy is impossible.
And he says that. He says, when I have been wronged by my spouse and she has painfully confessed it and requested forgiveness, I have the option of justice or forgiveness so powerful, right?
Yeah.
Like we want justice right away. We want to be justified. We want something. We want the pain sometimes that we feel, or the discomfort that we feel, or disregard or disrespect or whatever disses, all the disses we feel. We want the other person to feel that that's very painful.
Yeah.
I love that there's a power between justice or forgiveness. That's a powerful thing to be able to offer, right? And to choose forgiveness, knowing that this person has confessed and asked for forgiveness. Like that's very humbling.
Yes.
It takes a lot of courage to do that. But that's also an actionable measure for people to be able to demonstrate in their relationships that will help aid them in being able to communicate words of affirmation to each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
It goes on to say, if I choose to forgive, intimacy can be restored. Forgiveness is the way of love. So in a practical sense, whatever the problem is in the relationship, there's going to be a disconnect until both parties choose to forgive.
That's right.
Once they can say, I forgive, and I'm not holding this thing, and I have no intention of bringing it up again,
That's right.
then we can move forward.
Right.
But for as long as either one of them is holding on to it in their mind, waiting for the opportunity to bring it up again, you're not going to be able to move forward. You're going to be stuck at that place.
Yeah. And holding on to it is the moment in which they drop that ball again, right? And fall again. You're there ready to crack the whip versus saying, I remember a conversation we had, and you had pointed out to me in a very great way that I had repeated a behavior that didn't speak love, right? And my behavior, because I grew up with feeling like I needed to guard myself, and it was much better to be silent, to withdraw my words, right? I can't take back my words, and my words, it appears every time I say something is causing a problem. That's how my mind worked growing up. So I would withhold my words, and that wouldn't help because that's not communicating what's going on. My actions would turn out to be very different. And I remember you being able to pull that out, which was very helpful. It wasn't critical. You had seen it a few times. You had talked about it, and you had brought it to the forefront, but didn't condemn me in bringing it to the forefront.
As you say that, I'm reminded that in my background, I didn't grow up. I wasn't raised by parents. I was actually raised by psychologists. In a group home, seeing a different psychologist every day of the week, twice on Sundays. And so I never learned the defense mechanism of shutting down because we were always encouraged to talk more and more and more. So for me, problem solving is we're going to talk about it until we're blue in the face. And even if none of the talk is aimed at fixing the problem, it's still helpful because it expresses all of the feelings about it. So when someone feels a certain way, they should be willing to talk about it, and their spouse should be willing to hear it. Now, usually the man says, oh, that's how you feel? I go into fix mode, right? How can I fix it? Get out of fix mode and just let her stay. And because sometimes things are done that are very painful and hurtful, and they want to express how they feel.
Yeah.
This happens in a conversation. Men don't know it, but they would prefer that this thing happen in a conversation than that it happened in an action. Okay? So if something happened and it hurts you, let's talk about it and express it so that you don't do something physical to express how you feel.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a big part of it.
Which was my action was I shut down.
Right.
And instead of talking about what the thing was. I don't do that anymore. I'm just
That's
saying.
right. You don't do that.
I did do that. But what he did do, and as an example, was create the atmosphere that my action, however, it did not communicate love to you. You made sure I knew that does not communicate love. Not only towards him, but it really didn't communicate love to myself.
Right.
If I didn't speak up for what was going on in me, right or wrong,
Yeah.
in my thought process, then I'm not standing up for what my thoughts are. And they will develop into actions.
Yes, they
Your
will.
thoughts become feelings,
Yep.
and those feelings become actions.
Yes.
And so it's really good to talk about it. But I think people don't cultivate safe environments. I think, for an example, this is what the author starts to talk about, right? It says, I am amazed how many individuals mess up every new day with yesterday,
Yeah.
right? So this person comes and whether it's in the moment or they brought this thing up again, they're bringing it to you,
Yeah.
right? Whether it was yesterday or not, but this yesterday thing is a big deal. But before I'm gonna put a pin in the yesterday thing to say this real quick. If the person is coming to talk to you about a thing, whether it's going to come out all clean and neat and sound great and without condemning, sorry, people might not be there, but leaving the space open for them to express themselves instead of shutting it down or defending it or otherwise, it will, I think, foster them being able to express themselves more.
Yeah.
Yes, people need to learn self-control as they're
Yes.
expressing and not bashing and all of those things, but expressing their actual needs. I think that's important. So not shutting a person down. But this part right here, I was like, okay, this is significant. Again, I'll read it. I'm amazed by how many individuals mess up every new day with yesterday. Why are you talking about what happened yesterday?
Right. He says they insist on bringing into today the failures of yesterday, and in so doing, they pollute a potentially wonderful present.
Exactly.
And then, I had this part highlighted because he gives some examples. And the examples, as I read through them, our listeners should say, do I do that? Is that something that I say?
Okay.
So watch, he says, I can't believe you did it. I don't think I'll ever forget it. You can't possibly know how much you hurt me. I don't know how you can just sit there so smugly after you treated me that way. You ought to be crawling on your knees begging me for forgiveness. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. He says, those are not the words of love, but of bitterness and resentments and revenge.
Right here, we probably need to pause because people live in this space.
Yes.
They do not let go of the previous thing. The reason why is because other parts haven't been done. So it's very difficult to do this if there has been no acknowledgement to the wrong because it keeps occurring. People can only take it but so much.
Yeah.
And that's why I really appreciate this author putting in some steps that if they put down these actionable measures, at least apply them. They could potentially not be bringing in yesterday's stuff because they're not harboring bitterness and resentment. Like, I really appreciate them. I'm grateful because you're going to correct me if I get it wrong. But I really appreciate that the Most High tells us not to let the sun go down on our anger.
That's right.
Because it builds us.
Yeah. Resentment is you still being angry the next day about something that happened a whole day ago.
A whole day ago.
And so what that proves, biblically, you're not dying daily if you wake up and you have resentment for something that was said or done yesterday.
That's right.
We're supposed to die daily, and our negative emotions and feelings and all that stuff dies along with the previous day.
Yeah. You really helped me. I'd have to go back to that same scenario. You really helped me with that because in my in my shutting down, obviously, if I didn't talk about it, it's still in my mind, right?
Yeah.
I'd wake up the next day. I'd wake up the next day.
And it's not so much that it's on your mind. It's you have thoughts about it and you have feelings about it and you want to do something about it. And so what ends up happening is you're like, something is going to be done about it, whether you're aware of it or not.
Right.
It's going to manifest in your actions or your tone or your connection.
Yes.
All of those things.
That's right. It'll come out in a sharp tone.
Yes.
It'll come out in distance.
Yes.
It'll come out in shortness or different dynamics like that, but it will come out. Yes. This is true. Even if you try to hide it with undertones of kindness.
Yes.
Yes, I'll do it, my dear. So
He says the best thing we can do with the failures of the past is to let them be history. Yes, it happened. Certainly it hurt, and it may still hurt, but he has acknowledged his failure and asked your forgiveness. We cannot erase the past, but we can accept it as history. We can choose to live today free from the failures of yesterday. Forgiveness is not a feeling, it is a commitment. I loved that part.
So good.
You have to be committed to saying that thing did happen,
That's right.
but I forgive it.
Right.
And I'm not going to bring it up again.
But I appreciate that the author wants to acknowledge it. A lot of times we're taught in certain communities, let it go. Just let it go and give it to Yah.
Yeah,
Okay. But I did feel something.
that's right.
I can't act like I didn't feel it. So don't act like you didn't feel it, but don't let your feelings dictate your actions.
Yeah.
Right? And so I really appreciate that there's still an acknowledgement that it hurt, but the facts are you're going to have to get over it.
Yeah. At some point, if you want to move forward in the relationship, you have to get over it.
That's right. It's a commitment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't think many of us understand commitment in this flippant world. We think we can choose something and take it back to the store and return it.
We don't understand for the most part.
Right. And we think that way about relationships.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I don't want this person this week because they don't fit what I would like. We could do the same thing with our spouses, you know. It is a commitment and it is agreements. We talk about agreements all the time. But agreeing with your spouse allows you to make certain commitments.
Yes. He goes on to say, it is a choice to show mercy, not to hold the offense up against the offender. Forgiveness is an expression of love. I love you, I care about you, and I choose to forgive you. Even though my feelings of hurt may linger, I will not allow what has happened to come between us. That's a commitment. When you say something happened, but I'm not going to let it be stronger than Yah, right? What Yah has joined together, let no man put asunder.
Right.
We have to make sure that we're not allowing people to get in that place. Then it goes on and says, I hope that we can learn from this experience. You are not a failure just because you have failed.
So a lot of this is so meat. Okay. I'd have to go back and say, one, forgiveness is an expression of love, but the person says, I choose to forgive you, right? I can hear it now. People say, not just spouses, but people, it's hard to forgive. How do I forgive them when they did this, that, and the next?
Right.
I'll say this. I'll say this. If we consider what we're doing before a person and looking at it from a human perspective, like this person did a wrong thing to me, I'm upset with them, they don't deserve my forgiveness, which is typically a lot of conversations with people. Well, if you're looking at the actual relationship that we really have, which is with the Most High, there's a passage that tells us, while we were yet sinners, Yahweh Shai died, right? We were jacked up, doing jacked up stuff.
Yes.
And yet he still chose to forgive us. Yet we can't do that for one another, right? Then I would say our perspective is off. The Most High taught us to be able to do that because it was done for us. We should be able to look at the person and say, man, I love you like the Most High loves you.
Yeah.
And I forgive you. And I'm not going to hold this against you. We want to know why? Because I jacked it up yesterday and totally he did not strike me down where I'm at.
You're right. But most people don't see it that way. That's the story in the Bible of the unforgiving servant who received an enormous amount of forgiveness and a few seconds later went out and tried to hold somebody accountable.
Right.
Even saying the exact same words that he said to receive forgiveness.
Right.
He heard those words and completely disregarded them. That story is in the Bible because we act that way sometimes.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying, love. Like in here, in the word, and even in this author, it's so powerful, love. Love is so powerful. And love is in our words, just like death is in our words. Like being able to tell someone, I forgive you, and really sincerely not hold it against them, those are powerful words, you know? But yet we do need to be better about practicing how we love one another.
Yes.
It's the number one. It's a commandment,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. That takes us into this next part, which is a section called humble words. And it says, love makes requests, not demands. Let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
Love makes requests. One of the things that he gives as an example is making a request, saying to your spouse, hey, can you cook? Like I would say to you, hey, can you cook that fettuccine Alfredo that I really like? Instead of saying, what do I have to do to get a good meal around here?
Right.
Making a request and doing it in love is totally different than registering your complaint.
Yeah.
And people need to be aware of the difference between those things.
Yes.
Making a demand is not going to get you what you want. Yeah.
No, it's not. Right. I'd really like it if you can take out the trash. Like that's kind of can be a big deal for people. I'm tired of taking out the trash.
Right.
You know, you'd be like,
Yeah.
you can even ask a spouse, can you take out the trash? Okay. After a while, that might even become irritating. Can you take out the trash?
Right. Well, it's irritating to be requested to do something that you are already doing,
That's
even
right.
if you have not yet done. So I remember my mind would say, yep, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it when I do it.
When I do it.
Yes, I'm going to do it. No problem. I'm going to do it when I do it.
That's right. Yeah. Anyway, I agree.
So this next part, he is speaking of that part, the humble words and the requests, not demands. He says the way we express those desires, however, is all important. If they come across as demands, we have erased the possibility of intimacy and will drive our spouse away. If, however, we make our needs and desires known in the form of a request, we are giving guidance, not ultimatums.
That's right.
That makes good sense to me, right?
Yeah.
The guidance, people need to know, okay, this is what I would desire, and I'm going to make a request of you to fulfill my desire, instead of making a demand of you, because then the relationship changes from a reciprocal relationship to a like a master and servant type relationship.
Yeah, that's right. Even begin to talk about it like we're adults, right?
Yeah.
We're not children. You guide and direct a child and tell a child what to do because they don't have the guidance.
That's right.
And they don't have, the know-how at the moment, or they're still developing. You don't do that to an adult. An adult is fully aware, but are they? Sometimes we talk about how an adult didn't develop in certain areas. So to them, I'll give you an example. If you have company coming over and if someone never knew, okay, you're at someone's house, they've cleared, they've made the meal, you would think, okay, I'm going to get up and help clear the table. I'm not going to wait for them to try to take my plate for me and clean up everything after they just got finished being in the kitchen cooking.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, they may not have learned that. So some of these variables in here have to do with, do you even know if your spouse learned that, which we talked about in the beginning? Did they even receive that in their household in order to be able to do that? That might be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
If they didn't grow up in a household of affirmations, it will be difficult.
Yeah. This next part, he says, when you make a request of your spouse, you are affirming his or her worth and abilities. You are, in essence, indicating that she has something or can do something that is meaningful and worthwhile to you. When, however, you make a demand, you have not become a lover, but a tyrant.
Yeah.
Tyrants make demands and expect their demands to be met. It's not a good position in the relationship to be in, where it's like a tyrant or a master and a servant. It's not an equal relationship, and it doesn't demonstrate love.
No, it doesn't. It's actually quite controlling. You get partial results for what you get it, but it's not out of reverence for you. It's out of the fact that they're deflated. They don't have a choice.
Yeah.
If I don't do it, you're still going to talk to me like that, so I might as well just do it.
Yeah.
It's not coming from a place of love.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. They said here, I think you continue to read, it says, A request introduces the element of choice, right? Did you read that?
No, go ahead.
All right. A request introduces the element of choice. There's something about, especially being adults, none of us want to be told what to do.
That's right.
So let me choose.
Yeah.
Right? Let me choose what it is. It says your mate may choose to respond to your request or to deny it.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we expect that person to do what we told them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if we come that way, it is a demand.
Yeah. He says we cannot get emotional love by way of demand. My spouse may in fact comply with my demands, but it is not an expression of love. It is an act of fear or guilt or some other emotion, but not love. Yeah. So in the relationship, if this is happening, we have to stop doing it. Whoever it is, if there is a demand that is continually being made, it's not going to produce the desired result. So once both of the people in the relationship realize that, they have to say, hey, let's do this thing differently.
Right.
I agree that I'm going to say it differently, and you agree that you're going to respond differently, so that we can both be aware of what's happening. Sometimes when I'm counseling or coaching, life coaching, I say to the couples, you have to give your spouse permission to correct you.
Yeah.
Because correcting a situation is sometimes a fearful situation. Like if I say something, he's going to be mad or she's going to blow up. But they're not even aware that the thing is taking place.
Right.
So I say, you have to give them permission to acknowledge that thing so that you can become aware of how often it is happening. Oh, you're making a demand. So one of the things that may work, if you're in a relationship and you feel like your spouse makes a lot of demands, you can say this: are you asking me or telling me? It'll at least cause them to realize, oh, I was making a demand. Right? Now I need to acknowledge that I am asking you, not telling you. If I'm telling you, I'm in a parent position.
Right.
If I'm asking you, we're in a relationship. We're in a mutual relationship.
That's right. Yeah. That ideal of cultivating a safe environment, an environment where you can actually ask the questions. I remember doing work with families, and we had what we called we call them neutral chairs. So you put you put a chair in front of each other, right? And they'd face each other. And they'd sit in the chair. One person's in one chair, one person's in the other, and they're looking at each other. At that time, it is safe to say what you need to say. It cannot be brought up any other time. It's called chair time. It cannot be brought up outside of that. It cannot be bashing, and you cannot interrupt. The person speaks, and you are not allowed to defend yourself.
Okay.
It's an opportunity to hear them and acknowledge them. You're able to do that. You are not to respond to that. You can later bring it up. And it cultivated an opportunity to create a safe environment. You made an agreement that these are the rules to the chair, to the chair talk. And again, for families who had difficulties with being able to create a safe environment and have their words come out, chair time was excellent for a lot of families.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Systems. People need systems in place that allow them to grow physically, spiritually, and mentally.
Yeah. Yep.
I want to jump to this next part. This chapter was so packed, but I want to jump to this next part. This next part is a suggestion of what to do to improve the relationship if the man or the woman is not big on words. But if you're in a relationship with someone who's very big on words of affirmation and you're like, yeah, I just don't know what to say. He says, if you're not a man or woman of words, it is, and it's not your primary love language, but you think it may be the love language of your spouse, let me suggest that you keep a notebook titled Words of Affirmation. When you read an article or a book on love, record the words of affirmation you find. When you hear a lecture on love or you overhear a friend saying something positive about another person, write it down. In time, you will collect quite a list of words to use in communicating love to your spouse. I want to add one thing to this, which is which is a great place to get words of affirmation. If you watch movies, in movies, we are a third party watching something, and they have to be very obvious in their speaking and interacting in the movie. So in order for them to display to the audience that two people love each other, they have to go overboard so that we're clear on that thing. So movies have a lot of lines, and it's not that you're writing down the line from the movie, but you're able to hear it and say, oh, I totally understood that he loved her when this thing was said. Now, I'm going to write that down so that I can use that line. It's not so that you have a bunch of lines, but so that you can learn how to express the love.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, movies are a great one. Yeah. And sometimes if it's your spouse's primary love language, they're probably using it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you pay more attention to what's going on with your spouse, you may even be able to mirror. I didn't say parrot, mirror, right? Parroting is, I'm just going to mimic the same thing that they're saying. That's not a good idea. Mirroring is, I look at their reflection and I'm able to glean some light from their reflection. And I want to be able to do some of those things that I don't know how to do.
Right.
So.
And honestly, it is, it is my primary love language. And that's because I'm a communicator. I want to express how I feel. And I would say that's all it is. Giving words of affirmation is an opportunity to express how you feel or what you think. How you feel is usually related to a woman. If I talk to a woman, I would say how you feel. When I'm talking to a man, I would say what you think. Because men are mostly in tune with what they think. Women are in tune with what they feel. If you're trying to figure out how do I speak more words of affirmation, you could say as a man, what do I think about this? What do I think about her hair? Oh, I think her hair looks great. So I should probably say something about it to affirm it because I do like it. It should get to the point where you'll know that you're adept in this language when when your spouse realizes that you don't like something because you didn't say anything.
That's right.
Because if you do like it, you say something about it all the time.
That's right.
That makes it so that there's no guesswork. It'll be like, you must not like this outfit.
That's right. Yeah.
Because if you did, you would have said something.
You would have said something. It's same thing with food. Oh, you ain't compliment her on the food.
That's right.
You ain't trying to say nothing bad. You just trying to say that I don't like that food.
That's right. And you don't have to say I don't like it.
You don't have to say it.
If all the times when you do like something, you do express that you like it, there'll be a time when you're like, I didn't have to say anything at all.
Not at all.
Knew.
That's right. It's so interesting because the audience doesn't know, but you and I have the same primary love language.
Yeah.
And it's something that I enjoy doing. I learned to express myself better in words because I grew up with dyslexia is what the terminology is, but a difficulty with being able to relay information, sometimes and even receive it. And so I learned to get better with my words because my writing was terrible. But what it allowed me to do is pay closer attention to those details and to be able to provide those details.
Well, I think we also have the same secondary love language, which is physical touch. But I think maybe you didn't know that until we got into this relationship.
I did not. And that's another thing I'd like to point out to even some people who are, they're not married, because there's people who watch our podcast who are not married. Sometimes you don't know, you may not even realize you probably will realize your primary.
Yeah.
It may not be amplified or otherwise because there might not be a lot of people around to do that. But you may not know your secondary one because you're not necessarily matched up with the person who's going to be able to express those. For example, mine is physical touch. And it's interesting because I'm very touchy. Yeah, I'm very touchy with you. But he responds. So it makes me want to, for example, stroke his beard or rub his hands. If I see him crunching his hands because he's tired from playing the drums, I'll want to rub your hands. I didn't realize until we got into our relationship that physical touch was like, if he does not touch me, I actually feel like something's wrong. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we're missing some love here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's the space of love tank here is low, kind of thing. But
Yes.
that's in the next chapter. So
Absolutely, yes. So I'm excited to get into that next chapter. I don't want to make this one too long,
right.
Because the idea
so
is
much
there.
in here.
There is a lot in
But
here.
the ideal is there. You're right. The
I hope
ideal is
that
there.
our listeners and viewers are reading the chapter, and the chapter goes into way more detail. We just take an opportunity to speak on some of the things that stand out to us that we think maybe we can explain in a way that's going to be a little more relevant to our people. That's all. But definitely read the whole chapter, and we both have it on our tablets, which gives us the possibility of highlighting it and writing notes. And when you're listening along with us, write notes in the actual book. If you have the physical book or you have the tablet, highlight the parts that you like and write notes, especially when there are suggestions.
That's right.
And when Dr. Chapman gives a suggestion, try it. This is professional help. Imagine you said, I need to get professional help with my relationship. That's exactly what this book
And
is.
it only costs you the cost of the book.
That's right. And watching our podcast and listening to our podcast is also considered professional peer support. And it doesn't cost you anything but time. So the suggestions that Katryna and I give, make sure that you try them out, right?
Yeah.
And continue commenting down below on our videos. Let us know how these things are helping you as you are applying them to your life and your relationship.
Yeah. And as we're coming to an end on this podcast and segueing into the other one, as you explore this particular one with your spouse and you figure out, okay, well, this may not very well be their love language, you'll learn that there are other love languages along the way that might be applicable to them.
Yes.
But again, a good encouraging word does not hurt. The other thing that I wanted to point out is we do everything based on what Yahweh has written. This book is full of wisdom and knowledge and insights that come from the word.
That's right.
Many of the times I have jotted down different scripture areas that have come up. Just the Holy Spirit provides. That's right there. This is right there.
Yeah.
Because this book, the Most High has already said many of these things. He's just mapping out some practicals on how to live out what the Most High has already said.
Yes. There is one last section. Flip to this section real quick. I want us to both share this with our audience. This is towards the end of the chapter where Dr. Chapman gives 8 suggestions of things that can be done. You see it there. It's the very end of the chapter. It's 8 suggestions of things that can be done for words of affirmation.
Okay. Let's tell me what it starts with a little bit.
If your spouse's love language is words of affirmation, you see that there?
Let me see. The very, very end.
So there's a section of the book where Dr. Chapman gives 8 suggestions, and these are very important. I want to take the time. I'll read the first one, and then you do the second, and we'll just alternate back and forth.
Okay.
Because this is very practical information that someone can meditate on after they finish listening to this podcast. It says, if your spouse's love language is words of affirmation, 1, to remind yourself that words of affirmation is your spouse's primary love language, print the following on a card and put it on a mirror or other place where you will see it daily. And all it says is, words are important, words are important, words are important.
And the second one he provides, it says, for 1 week, keep a written record of all the words of affirmation you give your spouse each day. You may be surprised how well or how poorly you are speaking words of affirmation.
Right. Now, that number 2 is important because things that don't get measured, you don't know if it's growing or not.
That's correct.
But if you make a list and say, I said this and I said that and I said this and I said that, you'll know if you're growing in this thing. His third suggestion is set a goal to give your spouse a different compliment each day for 1 month. If an apple a day keeps the doctor away, maybe a compliment a day will keep the counselors away. You may want to record these compliments also so you will not duplicate the statements.
Yeah, that's important because then it doesn't sound
Sounds
authentic
fake.
or genuine.
You're
Right.
like, you just said that
You just said
yesterday.
that yesterday. Right. Yeah. Like, for example, because I'm going to pause for a minute. Like, for example, I will tell my love all the time that he is a good man. And I mean it. I make every effort because I can't change the fact that it's as simple as you're a good man. But I begin to describe in what ways I see him to be a good man in that particular day.
Yeah.
But
Right.
still, he's a good man.
Thank you, love.
Yeah. Number 4, learn to say I love you or other expressions of affirmation in a couple of different languages.
He's not saying different languages like different Chinese and Spanish.
No.
He's saying learn to say I love you in a couple different ways.
That's
basically.
right. In a couple of different ways. Is he saying it in words?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're the best, babe. I really appreciate everything that you do.
Yes. That's right.
Right?
That's right. That speaks
That's
love.
right. And right. And as an example, giving those examples. Yeah. I appreciate it every time you open up the door for me. It makes me feel so wonderful.
Oh, that's very good. I'll do more of that. Number 5 is compliment your spouse in the presence of his or her parents or friends. You will get double credit. Your spouse will feel loved, and the parents will feel lucky to have such a great son-in-law or daughter-in-law.
This one, number 6, I think people need to chew on because we may not spend enough time doing this. Look for your spouse's strengths. And then after you look for them, tell her or him how much you appreciate those strengths. Significant. Be specific. I like how you reach out to people at church who don't seem to have anyone to talk to. Or you're really keeping up with the job search. I know it'll pay off.
Right. Those are great examples.
Great.
Because they're specific and they're encouraging.
It's specific but people have to look for it.
Yes.
And they have to have the courage to just say it.
Yeah.
But they do have to be specific. Specific, very key.
His number 7 example is occasionally email or text a note of affirmation during the day or when one of you is traveling. Or if you know your spouse is having a hard day, send a link to a funny website. So it's just a suggestion, but the idea is take a minute out of your day and express how much you love to that person.
That's right.
It can be as simple like sometimes you and I will go back and forth and say, I was just thinking of you.
That's right.
And it's important to know, oh, okay, well, I'm having a rough day, but it's good to know that you're thinking of me.
Yes. Yeah. The next one is number 8. Thank your spouse for something they do routinely and wouldn't expect to be complimented on.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Finding something that happens on a regular basis and being willing to say, thank you for that thing. I appreciate that thing.
Yes.
They're like, oh, I didn't even know that you noticed. Yeah, I did notice and I appreciate it.
That's right.
That's good.
Yeah. Because you never know, the simple things can still speak volumes.
That's right.
Yeah.
This has been a very good chapter,
Yes.
good podcast. Hopefully all of our listeners and viewers learned something from it. I am hoping that we can find a little bit more time to be more consistent. Our goal is to put out our podcast every Monday morning at 6 a.m.
Yes.
But between operating X Nation Store and operating Prophecy Ministries,
yes.
and all the things that we do, sometimes it does get a little bit difficult to keep up with that schedule.
It does. And I'll have to say, I really do appreciate our listeners. You guys, I'll say the encouragement that you guys give is our love languages, words of affirmation. It's very affirming. It is one of the reasons why we started this was to be able to give to other Israelites. And we really appreciate the things that you do acknowledge in what we're doing here. At the same time, I've also noticed our listeners telling us that they're really excited to hear the next episodes, but they're really just eager. No one has said anything negative, like, what y'all doing? Why you ain't put out y'all,
Right.
They're just appreciative
Yeah.
of the fact that we're doing it. And they do look forward to looking at it week to week.
I think our Like I mentioned before, our viewers and listeners are very intelligent.
Yes.
They know that we have a life.
Yes, they do.
That the Most High has put a lot on our plate. And that we do this out of love.
Yes, we
Right?
do.
We're doing this out of love. So many times we have members of our church who are like, they're in a relationship, but their relationship is struggling and they just need some positive help, some tools
Yes,
in their
right.
toolbox.
Yes.
So view this podcast as a tool in your toolbox when you're like, oh, we're struggling with this. What can we do? You can sit down in front of the TV, have dinner, and listen to us. It's like you're having dinner with us,
Yeah.
but we're doing all the talking
That's right. And then you guys can have a conversation with one another.
about what we exactly.
That's right.
exactly that.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you did a great job in this
You
podcast.
too, love. It's always great chatting with you.
Yes,
It really is.
absolutely. And to our viewers, make sure that
Always
you
knocked out.
he's knocked out. He knocked out. He's like,
Look.
I love when y'all talk because I sleep. For our viewers and our listeners, we love you. We appreciate you.
Yes.
Make sure you subscribe and share these videos. If you know of anyone who can benefit from this content, make sure that you share it. We appreciate you, and we will see you on our next episode of Israelite Life. Shalom.
Shalom.
You have been listening to the Israelite Life podcast with Prophet and Katryna. We hope you have enjoyed this time together. Make sure you subscribe and catch a new episode every Monday morning at 6 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Shalom and be blessed.